first off, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Ruby AU and C-Link. Once again, they've come through to give us food and a room to do this in.
Right.
So,
Go C-Link.
it's a great place to work. Alright, let me get my speech up. Now I was up to about 12:30 last night writing, because I'm a very, very organised person. So, this is web scraping for fun. I'm Sean, I love Ruby, I love Tetris. My friends are starting to suspect I might be a robot. Who knows? So, first up, what is web scraping? It's where you use a program to pull down a web page or an API and get data out of it. So instead of doing it yourself, you make your programs work for you, which is always the best, laziest way to work. So the best case scenario for this is when your website gives you a lovely API to work with. JSON, XML, doesn't really matter. Ruby's pretty agnostic in that. So in this case, I'm looking at JSON API. So this is the Reddit API trimmed down for the bits I care about. So I got sick of being in a windowless office, so I wrote a script that gets me nice background images every day. Simple. And so Reddit provides this subreddit called Earthborn, which is not as nasty as it sounds. It's actually just really nice background images. If you remember my background, can I bring it up? Yeah. So this image came from there, which is really pretty. Every morning I'm greeted by a pleasant image. This makes me smile a little bit. So yeah, I'll be running you through sort of 4 different cases. There's this, there's HTML, there's when you need a session, and then there's the really ugly, nasty hack of actually using a web browser. So, let's look at a bit of code. This is all standard library Ruby. You don't need any gems installed. If you have Ruby, this program will work, which is my ideal scenario. 0 dependencies. So we bring in JSON and OpenURI, which are not core but standard library, so you do need to require them still. JSON obviously lets us parse JSON objects and create them. We all know how that pretty much works, I assume. But the OpenURI I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite features of the standard library. Basically, the open function is usually used for standard files on your disk. You open your YAML file, your JSON file, your text file, and you read it, or whatever. OpenURI allows you to just pass in a URL, and it will download it for you. That's beautiful. It makes such clean, small code. Now, since I've been using Reddit, I've noticed one thing. They love to give you a 429, our servers are busy, bugger off. So this thing would fail more often than not. So, sorry?
Is that a common code?
What was that, sorry?
429, is that a common
This is my first coming across it, but it is standard HTTP status code. Yeah. Like everyone knows 418, I'm a teapot, but no one knows 429, I'm busy. So I actually handle that exception here. So if this little ugly bit of code basically gets the status code of the error, which is, if it's not 429, I want to re-raise it because I have a real problem. If it is a 429, I put out a nice little message that gives me a love heart at the end telling me to try again. And I wait a minute, and then I rerun this thread. So fun fact, this method before yesterday was actually called try really hard to get threads, because it keeps calling itself until it gets a bloody answer. But I figured that wasn't very professional, so I renamed it. So that's the first half of this script. The second half is dealing with the data and downloading it. So up here we have the getRandomThread, which calls getThreads, which was the method we defined here. So it looks through the data. So if we go back to here, this is the data it's looking through. So in the data keys children, we want one of these that has the domain i.reddit.it, because that's really easy to download for us. We don't need to do anything fancy like go to image UR or GTCAD or what other crazy websites people are using these days. So we go through each of those children and we use .map to build an array. And we only return the data if its domain is i.reddit. And then because obviously we have a bunch of nils because they're not all going to be that domain. We call compact to bugger them off. We call .sample to pluck a single random one out of that array. So that's given us one single thread to get our image from. So this download method here, I've actually kind of over-engineered to make a point. It was initially just file.expand path, file.write, file.expand path, and open.read. But the problem with open.read is it'll read the entire download into memory first before it pushes it to your disk. So if you were downloading a gig file, that sucks. If you're downloading 10 gig, you're probably going to start hitting swap space. And no one wants to do that. That's nasty. So despite the fact I'm only putting down like a maximum of about 10 megabytes, I wanted to showcase how to properly stream a file to your disk. So I actually learned how to do this last night. We open the URL as a block and we read 8 kilobytes of the stream at a time, and with our file path we write that buffer. And we keep doing that until we stop getting data from this stream. And we're all done and dusted. It's nice and easy. Our memory usage is absolutely minimal. It's beautiful. And then the actual code that I wrote is this. Single line. I want to download a random thread, which is the epitome of simplicity. And that'll download it to my home directory background.jpg, which I have rigged up to be my background. So whenever it changes, it magically fixes itself and changes on my desktop. So now we're going to move on to a slightly more complicated scenario, which I call the usual scenario, where you just have a bunch of HTML you want to read. So this is actually the table from Hacker News, if you know the website. That shows you all of the best submissions. I'll be taking you through an example of that in a minute. That's my second usual example. For the first simple one, we're going to be looking at reading Open Graph data. So this is like the one good thing Facebook has done. They've implemented this standard where you have these OG properties, which basically tell you a little bit about the site, or the web page usually. So it's usually got a title, an image, a brief description, and I think it has author? No, it doesn't, but it can. So if you say run a forum and you want to present a nice link, like Twitter or Facebook do, this is the data you'll look at from the web page they linked up. And at the top there, you've got the Twitter information, which is very, very similar, but used for creating links specifically to Twitter. So they're a bit more selfish. So this is the entire script. It's very, very simple. We use a gem called Nokagiri for this, which is a native C extension. So it can be a little more troublesome to install if you're not on Linux or OS X. Windows can be a bit funny. There is also a gem called Ogre, which is pure Ruby, but it's slower and it has less compatibility. It's less fancy. But if you want portability, that would be your go-to. So this is essentially 4 lines of real code to turn a web page into this little hash. So the ugliest, nastiest part of this is this CSS selector. You could pass in your usual class, so dot table or whatever, or you could pass in hash ID, like your usual CSS selectors. What this one is doing is we want a meta element which has a property of property that starts with OG colon. That's all that means. So you can use that in your CSS files and your web browser will know exactly what to do with it. That's what we're doing. So before that, we actually initialize Nokagiri as HTML. It also does XML. I've never had to use that yet, but it's there. And we use our openuri.read to just download our data and pass it in. Nice and simple, nice and clean. Now, this is one of those things I really, really love about Ruby. It takes away a lot of ugliness for you. I create an array of 2-element arrays. So this one is the first property, like I get the property and I take off the OG of it, and then I get what was in it. So if we look back here, I get, for URL, I get this. For title, I get that. So I'm building an array of 2-element arrays. And one of the beautiful things you can do with that in Ruby is call .2h on it. It'll explode if you pass in any other sort of array. If there's an element with 3 in it, it won't do it. It's got to be an array of 2 arrays, but if you call .2h, it magically turns into this for you. It's just one of those lovely little things it does. So here I have passed in an IMDb for the rock, because that was the example on OpenGraph's page, so I figured why not. And yeah, so it has a URL, an image, a type, which is part of the standard apparently, and yeah, your little description, and that's just really handy for, you know, your forums and whatnot where you want to just display a snippet about the page. Yeah.
So where did you get the input for the OpenGraph data? Where?
So this is the URL I wanted it from?
Yeah, where did you get that?
Oh, so that's just an IMDb link. That was on the actual OpenGraph's website. That's the same example they use.
Oh, so that wasn't your own. But as in you just found that, it's just a,
Oh, yeah. But this is all my own code. But yeah, I just borrowed their example because why not? You can point it at nearly any web page and it'll give you a real response. I do have all of these scripts on my machine, so I can try and give you a demo if the Wi-Fi plays nice. But yeah, so that's pretty straightforward, that one. Then we move on to the more ugly one, which is the Hacker News, where my page is cut off slightly, but yeah, so this is the method to get front page of Hacker News. This is an ugly bit of data. It's not neatly contained like the OpenGraph stuff. This is someone built a site and they never thought someone was going to do this. That was not very thoughtful to us. Not at all. So we start off the same way. We get our link and we download it and we pass it to Nokagiri. Now, because we're using this lovely method, which I'll explain in a second, we can't use .map. So we instantiate a results array that's blank. Now, each slice, this is an amazing method. Basically, I have an array of elements. It's like 100 odd long or whatever. Each slice, 3, says, I want this array to be split into elements of 3. So that's actually a really badly named variable now that I look at it. No, get my mouse over here. No, I can't. Yeah, okay. So this is actually 3 elements. So that should be called elements, not singular element. That's confusing, that's my bad. But yeah, so the first line on this is, unless it is of size 3, we want to skip. And that's because the last result we get is the more link at the bottom, and that's only made up of 2 TRs, and it has no diagram in it whatsoever. So that's just a little catch to stop us exploding there. Now, I clicked. So this user element thing I define up here because it doesn't always exist. This is, I guess they allow anonymous submissions. I've never actually used Hacker News, I've only ever read it. So we define that up there because later on we need to check its existence and it just keeps line lengths shorter and it's just a bit nicer. So we move on to putting things in our results our results array. So the first thing we do, and this is where it starts getting a bit actually using Nokagiri. So element 0 is the first table row. @CSS is a lovely method. So usually you would call .css, which I've done below here, and it returns an array of all matches. So you know, if you have 100 of them, it'll return 100. @CSS returns the first hit. So if you know there's only going to be one, or you only care about the first one, you can use @CSS to make your life a lot easier. You don't need to type .first or brackets 0. And then we just want the text from it. So that's what's contained in the element itself as pure text, no HTML gets spat out by that. And because Hacker News has a dot in it, we get rid of that with the G-sub. We just make it 0, and then we turn it into an integer, which is lovely. And looking at this now, I realize I didn't need a G-sub with dot, and I'll explain that in a little bit, because that comes relevant down here. Pardon me. So now we care about getting a story. So we want a title and a link element for our stories. Element 0, so the first table row again, @CSS. So title we've got class title, a tag, dot text. Very simple, very straightforward. The link is basically the same, except we access it like a hash, which gets us the property from that. So if the tag has a href, you can do :href. If it has a source, you can do :source, that sort of stuff. So data attributes can be accessed this way. And yeah, and so we move on to user. And this here is why I defined it earlier. We don't have .try because we haven't included active support. That's actually a Rails thing I found out. Because I thought that existed everywhere because it's a fantastic method. So we do a simple ternary. So if this does exist, we return the dot text. If it doesn't exist, we just return nil. So that way we don't explode. And again, the same for the href on that link. If it doesn't exist, we return nil. If it does, we return the href. Now, comments here. This tricked me. I spent 30 minutes on these two lines because non-breaking space doesn't get g-subbed out by space and it doesn't split on it properly. So that's where I found this cool .2i hack. So we get the second element, so it's the second TR, and we get the dot subtext anchors, and we want the last one, so we use CSS instead of @CSS. We turn it into text, and we got .2i. So that text is actually like 100 space comments. So it has the word comment in it. I don't want that. I want strictly a number. And we do the same for the href, and then we return the results. But let's look a little more at this 2i. It's pretty magic. It takes a string and it tries really, really, really hard to turn it into a number. So the first example here, I have 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, 4, 5, 6. It returns 1, 2, 3. So it keeps going until it finds the first non-number character and then just stops, which is fantastic. So we type the word 1, it gives us a 0. Some argue this is really bad behavior. It should explode if there is no thing in there. And to do that, you just call integer and pass in what you want, and that'll give you that behavior. But .2i is very, very nice and lenient. So this one starts with white space and has a bunch of white space, but it still just returns the first number. So it ignores leading white space, which is really handy. We don't have to care about any of that. And this A1, B2, C3, because the first letter in it is A, returns 0, which is good. I think it would be too much magic. Yep.
That's pretty cool. If you had 1, 2, 3, ONE, 4, 5, 6, would that be 1, 2, 3, like a digit 1, 4, 5, 6?
Sorry, what was your...
Well, I don't think it would, but that would be really cool if you had 1, 2, 3, ONE, 4, 5, 6, and pass that into...
Yeah, that would just return 1, 2, 3 again?
Yeah, that would be cool.
I can actually show you. Aha. Yeah. Get big. Where's my mouse? Your computer's going
I think everyone else here's probably tried it, but...
Yeah, that's alright.
To try it.
So 1, 2, 3, 1, 4, whatever, 4, 5, 6. Dot 2i returns 1, 2, 3. So sadly, it's not that magic. But
It's overrun, yeah, I was about to say. I was about to say you can patch it, can't you? So
Yeah.
do whatever you want.
Well, you go wrong. Yeah, just monkey patch the string class, it'll be fine.
It seems wrong when you do the first 3 as well, but that's awesome.
Yeah, so that is the beauty of .2i. Now, oh yeah, so the output from that code, so we call the method which returns an array, and we just want the first element. So I should have done dot first, but sometimes I slip into array mode and just type 0. That's my bad, I'm too used to like Python and the likes. So we get our rank, which is actually a digit, which is beautiful. Story, a nice string. Link, a nice string. I've just cut it off there because otherwise it was just a really, really long line that was not necessary. The user class, so Dowie apparently posted this, and the link to Dowie from root is user ID Dowie. And comments, we only have 1 to 8. Give me a half hour to get rid of the trailing space on that bugger. And then again, the link to the actual comment section. I guess they rely on relative paths, which is a bit naughty of them, but they also styled their side of tables, so they don't care very much. But what if we want to do something fancy? What if we have to log into a web page and store cookies and manage a session? Ugh, too much work. Let's use Mechanize. So this is another gem which actually uses Nokigiri in the back end, but it's as though you're browsing around the site. You start a session, well, I call it a session, they call it agent, but you start a new Mechanize instance, and then you go from web page to web page to web page, and it'll store your session, it'll store your cookies, it helps you interact with forms, it helps you interact with links. It's just a nicer way of interacting with the web on a continual scale. So this is what you'd use if you had to log into a forum or whatnot. The limitations of Mechanize is it doesn't actually boot up a browser, you don't get JavaScript, none of that. Which I consider a nice thing. It's much quicker. It's the last of the nice ways of dealing with the internet before we actually boot up a browser. So let's take you through a quick rundown of this. We start by obviously requiring Mechanize. We start our session, which is just mechanize.new, nice and straightforward. Now, I've picked on threaded.org, which is a Rails-backed forum. It's just nice and small, it's quick. I picked on them because they have a demo that has a login page that doesn't require a password or a captcha. It took me a while to find a site that would be that nice, but they also reset their database every hour or day or something, so I don't feel too bad for leaving a comment or two randomly on their site, which is good. But yeah, so we go to their login page for their demo. Now we find the last form on that page. So session.page is the current page you're on. .forms is a list of forms on that page. And .last is the last one. So I want to log in as Jane. So I set the name field on the form to Jane. And it also has, do I have a picture of it? So, sorry about the sudden contrast change. I set the name here to Jane, and I leave the admin mark the same. So I don't have to toggle it because it's already checked. So this means I'll log in as an admin when I hit the login button. So then we confirm we're logged in. So, we do form.submit to submit the form. It's the same as clicking on the button, which is really handy. So that's actually taken us to a different page. We've logged in. It's worked. It's done its magic. So we're on a different page, and this parser thing, so session.page.parser is a Nokigiri instance. So everything you just learned before applies to this as well, which is really, really nice. So we want to look at all of the flash messages on the screen, change them in text, and strip off the junk on the beginning and end, and we get signed in as Jane and admin, which means we've done it, we got in. Beautiful. This is where the dodginess starts seeping in. We want to, so we have a session.page.links, which is a list of all the links on the page. I want the 9th link. I tried to find a nice way to detect that the text was off topic. I didn't try that hard, I'm pretty lazy. Like dodgy script, you'll tend to do this sort of way, so I click on the 9th link, and I click on it. So that takes me to a different web page again. I am now on the off-topic area, and I want to create a new thread. So I find the last form on the page again, because the first 7 forms are different language options. I don't know why they're forms, but they are. And we want to populate topic title with web scraping with Mechanize, and topic content with it's super cool, you should check out the GitHub. And it links to their GitHub. So I figured I'd give them some SEO for picking on them. And I submit that form. So, and then that is the output I get. So the italicized super, it's really super cool. And the GitHub is a lovely link. And as you can see, it was posted by Jane, which is really nice. So then we're going to move on to the worst case scenario. The one you only ever touch if you hate yourself. We want to use Selenium. So Selenium actually supports a lot of different backends. You can use Firefox, you can use Chrome, you can use Safari, you can use Internet Explorer. And up until about a month ago, I would have strongly suggested PhantomJS, which isn't a regular desktop browser. It's a browser designed to be run without a header. It runs in the background, you don't ever see it, but it's just basically a WebKit session you can talk to. It was fantastic, beautiful, thing of beauty, but they discontinued. Too much work. And understandably so, it sounds like a huge undertaking to build a full browser just so people can interact with the web using Ruby or Python or what have you. So I use Chrome because I couldn't get the Firefox driver to install nicely on my desktop, so I just installed Chrome driver and that worked a treat. So we require the gem Selenium WebDriver. We set up a WebDriver instance and we tell it we want to use Chrome. So that could be Firefox or Safari or Internet Explorer. Then I tell it to set the window size to 1024 by 768. I do this so I know what I'm working with no matter whose screen this runs on. Because by default, for some reason, it took up like this much of my screen. It was weirdly tall and long and I don't know why. So I figured I'd lock it down so I knew exactly what was happening. Because I've been caught by that. There was a project I was working on that used Selenium for RSpec feature test. If any of you have used them in Rails, that's backed by Selenium. I pushed this project, which worked locally, to Jenkins. And Jenkins went away and ran, and it failed. It couldn't find this element. I'm like, the element's right there, you idiot. What are you doing? Clear as day. And then I found this extension, which lets you take screenshots of failures. I took a screenshot, it was running at 640 by 480. It was using mobile mode, so my link was hidden. And it won't click on things that are hidden. I'm like, huh. So I've learned to resize the screen. I had a Sleep 5 there, but I think that's just because I was testing stuff. That shouldn't be there. I use sleeps elsewhere, but not there. That's good. Oh, I was recording my screen and I wanted it to sleep for a second so I could get it ready before it. You'll see it in action shortly. So, we want to log in as a user. Again, I'm picking on threaded because it's nice and easy. And it's, there. So I navigate to the login screen. So I find an element that has the name property of name, which if we remember from our login screen was the name field. I send backspace 3 times to clear the form because it's populated by Joe. I could have also done a Control-A backspace, but so you really are interacting with the web browser as though you're using a mouse and keyboard. Like, this really highlights that fact. And then I send the keys Selenium, because I named myself Selenium so it's slightly different, and I hit submit, which submits the form. So I'm admin user Selenium. So this one actually has a nice little method for finding the off-topic link. So I'm no longer going to the 9th link in the page. I can find a link which has the text off-topic in it and click it, which is really handy and nice. Try not to trip over myself. And because this site uses turbo links, Selenium can't hook into the web page load and whatnot, so it just thinks it's doing nothing. So if I don't sleep for 5 seconds, because my internet sucks, it tries to find this element and it doesn't exist because it's literally not there yet. Turtle links is lovely for a user, Selenium hates it. So yeah, once we've waited for 5 seconds, we know the page is definitely loaded. We find the element with topic title and we send in the keys web scraping with Selenium because we want to tell them we're using Selenium this time. And then there's a sleep, 1 second, because there is a CSS animation that shows the form coming down. And if you don't do that sleep, can't find element topic content. Explodes in your face. But you can see where this starts to get fairly fragile and why I use it as a last resort. Like at the end of the day, I'd probably not even recommend it for feature specs, but I'd recommend trying to find a good JavaScript testing framework. But it is there, it is used by people, and the knowledge is useful if you have to mark up a bloody quick script. So we said it's super cool, you should check out the GitHub, and obviously it got cut off. And we submit the form, and then we have to remember to tell the browser to close, else it just sits there. Now, this is what that looks like in action. I obviously tried a few times to record this properly. And then I cut it off really quickly. Yeah, so that's what it looks like in action. It just sits there spinning away with this thing, which is pretty handy. It's honestly a bit hypnotizing to watch, really. It's a bit weird watching your computer do its own thing. Like, is it going to log into my Facebook? Am I getting hacked? What's it doing? Right, so that's the main ways of interacting with web pages. So this is using standard library to check a few things. This isn't overly comprehensive, but this is what I knocked up last night to sort of protect yourself. So, should I fetch method? We want to require, that should be net HTTP, but net HTTPS works as well. I was battling with SSL. Yeah, so we create a new URI instance, which is internal to Ruby. It handles reading URLs. It knows what parts of what's a scheme, what's a domain, what's a path, what's a query. It just makes dealing with URLs themselves a lot nicer, and that's what you need to pass to net HTTP, which is the low-level HTTP driver. So the first thing we check is if the scheme of the URL passed in is not HTTP or HTTPS, we don't want it. We send false. We should not fetch this. We don't have anything to do with FTP, SSH, Gopher, what have you. So we create our connection, which is a new net HTTP instance where we pass in the host, and it took me way too long to realize I needed to pass in the port as well, because if you don't pass in the port, it assumes port 80. And if it's a HTTPS site, that returns 0 and explodes at you, because HTTPS is 443. So you pass in your port as well. Now we actually need to tell it whether or not we're using SSL. So we do a very rudimentary check of whether or not the scheme is HTTPS. Nice and easy, pretty clean. So, because we don't want to download the whole thing, we want to get the head. So web servers will traditionally send you a little bit of metadata before you download something, which has stuff like content type, content length, encoding, just a bunch of stuff. So we request head, which only grabs that tiny little bit of metadata, and then we check its content type. If it's not HTML, we probably don't care about it. I also get a check for JSON, but I'm a bit lazy. And content length is a beautiful thing, but not everyone returns it. So in this instance, I've naively assumed 0 if they don't supply it. This could bite me in the ass very, very easily, but at the same time, for a little demonstration, it's quite okay. So I check it for less than 5 megabytes, so 5 times 1024 times 1024 is megabytes, because we don't have the beautiful active support, so we can't do 5 megabytes. So, and if all of that passes, we don't hit any problems, we return true. We should download this file. So let's have a look at what some inputs could look like and what their outputs would be. So I actually had to try pretty hard to find an FTP site with Stella. So you got all the URLs up here. I stupidly didn't put these in the same order as this, so it's a bit confusing. Our first check is the FTP site. So the scheme is not HTTP or HTTPS, so it returns false. Next I check a JSON API, which is the same Reddit API I'm consuming in my initial script. And because it's not text HTML, it returns false. It returns text JSON or something. I didn't actually check, but it doesn't return text HTML, so we don't want it. Should I fetch big file? File arena speed test, 2 gigabyte.dat. So that's a 2 gig file, and I spent a while downloading that before I figured out how to correctly detect its size. But it now produces false, as it should. And we just have a regular old site, which is the page that lists all of those big test files. And it returns true because it's HTML, it's HTTP, and it returns a content size of much less than 5 megabytes. So that's just one way to protect yourself. You may want to just completely blacklist certain domains like mega upload and whatnot that you don't care about. You're just going to assume that people know what they're clicking. So, closing thoughts. Be nice. There are people running those web servers. Don't hammer them to hell. It's just very rude. You notice my timeout on my background script was 1 minute. I could have had it just sit there hammering and hammering and hammering and hammering and hammering, and the second it freed up, I got it, but I wouldn't like someone doing that to my website. So I wait a minute. And yeah. Do I have any? I think I had one more closing thought. Oh yeah. If you're trying to scrape the web to build a search engine, make sure you respect robots.txt. I've never had to do that. I've never experimented with building a search engine, but it's something you should be conscious of. There are gems for it. I had a quick look around. There are some that will tell you, it'll read the robots.txt and then you can pass it the URLs and it will say, no, that's not allowed by this. So, once again, Thank you to our amazing sponsors, Ruby AU for the food and selling for the room. If you have any web scraping related questions for me, feel free to ask. And my blog has a text version of this speech if you ever want to look up what I was talking about, or if I slurred or went too quick or anything. Oh, if there's no questions? Yep.
Have you considered using Capybara or something else instead of Selenium WebDriver?
It uses that in the background.
Okay. Wait. Selenium WebDriver uses Capybara in the background?
No, Capybara uses Selenium in the background if you turn on JavaScript.
I thought that would give you automatic writing and nice DSL.
It tries.
Yeah.
The feature specs with RSpec use Capybara,
Okay.
and I still had lots of nightmares. They really don't handle CSS animations well. Some AJAX requests are problematic. So I've had issues with the select2 JavaScript, if you've heard of it. But yeah, just lots of little issues. Sorry.
So you found it easy, like more straightforward to use with Selenium WebDriver, right?
I was just going for simplicity. I was just going for the lowest level. Like if I was writing a script to parse a web page, I would directly use Selenium. If I'm testing a website, I would use Capybara.
I thought Capybara used
It used to use Phantom.js by default, which is the browser, which is just a WebKit wrapper really, which is now discontinued, end of life. No more work on it, sadly. It was a fantastic little project. I'm sad to see it go. It died like a month ago. So very topical. Any further questions, or should we move on to Darren?
Ready.
No worries.
Okay, let's do this. All right, so I know we're at a Ruby talk, but meetup, but yeah, the guys thought UX talk could be helpful and of interest. So yeah, hopefully in your personal projects or even professional work, it's going to be a bit of use. So yeah, let's get started. So what is UX design? One definition is the process of enhancing user satisfaction by improving usability, accessibility, and pleasure provided in the interaction between the user and the product. So what does that actually mean in real world talk? So in your websites, in your applications, you want the users to actually enjoy what they're doing and achieve the goals they're using your app or site for. So whether they're trying to make a booking, buy something, play a game, they wouldn't be able to do that without any friction. So that's going to lead to increased conversion rates. That could be sign-ups, purchases, retention, engagement. They'll hang around longer, or they'll recommend you to friends, family, or colleagues. So let's get started with some of the tools we use at Sealing. So what we start off, before even jump into Photoshop or Sketch, is we actually start with a text editor. We start with story framing. So, interfaces are stories, whether you're designing a landing page, a mobile app, a sign-up form, or a chatbot conversation. So what we would do is start in a text editor. We'll ask a question. Let's say one recent project was redesigning some tour or product page, and we literally just listed out bullet points or asked the question, how do we explain this to a friend, what we're trying to do. So we would basically script that up. This example would be the product page would contain some description text, gallery of product, call to actions, etc. Sorry, are you saying the requirements you list out in text editor or the problem? The problem, yeah, and what you're trying to do and how you can achieve.
It encompasses both.
Yes, exactly right. So how you can, what the problem is and how you can solve it.
Okay.
Yep, good question. So, before you actually get into Photoshop or whatever, is literally get your pen, paper and whiteboard. So if you're not running a lean UX team, you might want to, you might have already interviewed some of your customers or users, or you've even run focus groups, but often not. I mean, in C-Link, we're running a lean team with 2 front-end devs, and we're just doing sort of lean UX. So yeah, this is how we kind of start. So yeah, grab a pencil, paper, sticky board, sticky notes and whiteboard it, and then start drawing out the user flow. So how they want to the site, maybe the landing page, or if they're coming from a search engine, it would be they could land directly on the product page itself, jump from a call to action, and then start through the checkout pages.
What does the diagram of a user flow sort of look like?
So it could just be, just boxes with arrows,
It's almost
kind of like a
flowchart.
site map or flowchart. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly right. Once we've established that, we will start to build up user personas. So this is a good representation of a typical user. So one of our sites over in Perth, C-Link Rock Nest, we've come up with this guy, Arthur. He's a retiree. He's 68. He wants to enjoy a relaxing weekend away with his wife at a new destination. So you try and create these believable user personas that you can use on your project. You can empathize with these people, and when you're building out your solutions, you actually reference these people. Say, how would Arthur get from this page to making a booking? So yeah, they sort of become believable. And this is one, but we've got 4 in total for our C-Link project, C-Link Nest project. So yeah, they become very helpful with so many things. So after the user personas, we would start with a wireframe. So that's literally, it could be a sketch of the interface, how it could look. We would start with literally just a pencil drawing, and then jump into something like Sketch. Which is this application here. So we've recently worked on a project. We've partnered with another company, and what they're doing is selling like our top 20 products around the nation to these members of this partner. So we started with the initial login screen, then we've got the validation screen, a failed state, if it hasn't validated. If it has validated, we jump down to the actual product pages. Let's say we've got this drop down here. When you click that, it will then display this screen. So that's sort of like a filter. If the user clicks this section, it will actually jump into this section here. So what we can do is we can, once we've got these going, we can actually export them and make them interactive. So we can send it over to key stakeholders, and they can start asking questions. How does the user flow work? And it provides a clear example or representation of the final product. So, let's go another screen here. So this is Envision, which is really cool. You can sign up for a free account and you get one active project. So what I've done is essentially just exported the JPEGs into here, and you can make them interactive. So we've got these hotspots. So you can send it over to your client or your stakeholders, and they can start interacting with the product and see how it's actually going to kind of work. So obviously it's like interactive, they can't enter a member number here. They can click the login and see what's going to happen. So it's going to validate. And then after 2 seconds, I've set it to show the next screen. So you would then come to this deals page. There'll be a whole bunch of products. They press anywhere, they'll see where the hotspots are. So I can click here, we get the filter, click outside, we can click inside this product. See more of the wireframe, see how to just look. Click the book now, we'll go to checkout, so they can see how this is represented. Go all the way down, complete the booking. So that's the whole flow, and that after getting the wireframes in, exported, that took me about 10 minutes to set up. So it's pretty handy. And within Sketch, I've actually got a template of a whole bunch of common symbols, like form, elements, or whatever. And it just makes it really easy to build up a wireframe in a short amount of time. So yeah, before you jump into any code, you can really just get something out there for the client. Yep.
That first sketch looked like it was done in balsamic with all the kind of wavy line, and then do you move on to sketch after so you draw it, then balsamic, and then you sketch? Is that your flow?
So you mean sorry, this one here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So something like balsamic can do something like this, but I mean that was one I picked from Facebook.
Yeah.
But I mean you could just hand draw that one. Yeah. 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 Okay. So yeah. So once your site's developed and you're good to go and it's out in the wild, we can start with some heat maps. So you can understand where your users are starting to click.
Sorry, before you move, you've gone through the design phase.
Yeah.
What are your peak times from that period where you get the best user feedback? Is it the wireframes? Is it the vision?
Sort of a combination. Wireframes we'd often send out to stakeholders or clients, and they'll have questions. But if you get into interactive prototype like Envision, that becomes a lot clearer tonight, I think, and answers a lot of questions.
It's worth it going to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's not too much time, but I think it really clears up. The site's out. Obviously, C-Link is the example here. So what we're doing is checking where users are clicking. So this is a good indication to find out, if there's some buried content under some navigation areas, we might be able to find that out. This is helpful to use alongside Google Analytics. So if we're running like a campaign, maybe like a special, and it's not surfaced on the homepage somewhere, and users aren't clicking through it via navigation, this might be able to help out along with the analytics. And even this search section here, we can find out what customers are really sort of changing, some of the options they might be changing in their search. So yeah, it's just a good little tool. So that is through, we use Hotjar, and I'll provide some links at the end, but yeah, that's quite a good tool. And as well as the clicks, you've also got the scroll heat map. So if you've got a really long page, you might have some buried content that's really valuable to the customer. So yeah, you're gauging by this, you want to readjust that instead of set higher up in content. Another really great tool is A/B testing. Google has recently rolled out a product called Google Optimize, which we're using. It's got a pretty handy wizard built in, so it connects up with analytics really well. And yeah, basically you might want to test, let's say you've got a new product that's out and it's not selling too well. You might want to test out variants of the call to action. So either add to basket with the blue, or continue, with variant colours, or adds basket with the darker colour. And you can test all of this out, you can set the percentages and whatnot, and you can see what tracks better. And after say 2 weeks, you'll be able to just go with the better option that's going to get more sales, obviously. So that's been pretty good.
Sorry, does that have like a different version of the same thing? I understand why A/B testing is, but the products you're talking about, do you distribute 2 different versions of the page or whatever, and then it picks one of them?
Correct. So it's got a really nice wizard. I should have put a screenshot in, but you can set the variants, and you can set the percentage of how many that'll get out to each user. So you can make, let's say, the top right, 10% of page loads. And basically it's got a wizard built in, so you can actually click the element within your browser. You can set the text. You can modify CSS colors.
Like a drag and drop one.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So it's really user friendly. So we found that quite good compared to others that we tested out. Yeah, worth looking at.
And so will that happen only if it goes through Google? Like I just haven't used it. Like how does it turn it?
You mean if they're coming from?
Yeah, so if people are making requests to your web server, it's got to choose one or the other.
It basically injects some JavaScript you've got to add in via Tag Manager.
Okay, sure. All right. Cool.
Yeah. So yes, help your user. So use signifiers where you can. Obviously, a standard browser link would have an underline text. Don't override that with styles. Some sites get fancy and they try and overrun that. Keep an underline text because that's what users are used to. It's intuitive for them. So keep it there. Provide information where it isn't obvious, like a file download size. If you've got a link to a file and it's 2 gig, they have no idea about that. They'll be sitting there for 5 minutes. So yeah, it's being transparent to your users, I guess, and just making them aware of what's actually going on. Provide inline feedback, so validation and loading messages. I was talking to a colleague the other day, and he was talking about signing up to a bank and setting up a new account. And he is a security engineer, so he's very secure, obviously. When he was creating his account, he made a really long password, so it was more than 16 characters. And he was trying to create this account and didn't know what was going on. After 5 minutes, he realized that it didn't accept more than 16 characters, but it was basically just giving a really vague, cannot create account. And yeah, it just frustrated him and he gave up, had to call the helpline basically. So yeah, just a waste of time when you could provide some simple feedback.
You don't need strong passwords with banks anyway.
No,
Not too strong.
And don't forget, the user experience doesn't start and end at your website or app. So before they come to your site, they might hear about it through a friend or even marketing. But after they've visited your site, whether they've bought something maybe or signed up to something, make sure the messages and the communication is on brand, or it's clear what you're telling them, and yeah, that impression's going to last. So that's important. So yes, remember you're not the user. That's probably the biggest takeaway I'd say. We're obviously pretty tech savvy here. We've got latest devices, fast internet, loads of shortcuts, whatever else, but most users aren't that tech savvy. So keep that in mind when you're testing and rolling out your projects. So I've got some notes. If you go, some links and some further reading if you like, or a little bonus, a little presentation user experience improvement. So yeah, you can grab the QR code on the shop. Go on. Finally, thank you to C-Link for the venue hire and Ruby AU for the pizzas coming up shortly. So, yeah, thank you guys.